graduated from National University of Singapore. So after I graduated, I joined the Defense Science Organization, worked on space for about 1.5 years, primarily dealing with big satellites. And then I joined National University of Singapore as a research engineer. Worked on small satellites over there for about 2.5 to 3 years, and before eventually starting NuSpace. When I was in the NUS, I was also working on small satellites, developing cube satellites primarily for educational purposes, as well as to develop the technology associated with CubeSats. The CubeSat is a short form for cube satellite. A cube satellite is typically made out of 5 units. So a 1 unit CubeSat is approximately 10 by 10 by 10 centimeters, weighing a maximum of 1.3 kilograms per unit. It's scalable and modular in that sense that you have a 1 unit cube satellite, and then you have 3 unit, 2 unit, and I think we have already gone all the way to a 27 unit. But the nice thing about it is that it helps to reduce the cost associated with launching the satellites and building the satellites. This cube satellite thing has brought down the cost of developing, cost of ownership of satellite, cost of launching satellites into space. So it's much more accessible for commercial companies with cube satellites. So NuSpace, it's a company that's focused on providing safety for everyone everywhere. And how we do that is we are providing connectivity to remote locations using small satellites. So why this vision and why this mission? It's because during my graduation trip after university, I went on a hiking trip with a group of friends. We went to the Grand Canyon in the US, and we decided to hike from the top of Grand Canyon all the way down to the Colorado River and back up in a single day. So we set off around 7 a.m. From the top of the canyon all the way down to Colorado River at about 1 p.m. But when we reached the bottom, one of my friends informed us that he sprained his ankle. So it was a tough time trying to get back out of the canyon because we had to carry him as well as carry his backpack. And when we tried to call for help using our cell phones, there was no connectivity at all. Couldn't reach anyone for help. So this kind of experience kind of made me realize the importance of connectivity, even if it's a simple form of connectivity. For example, like a SOS button that you can push and get help. That could have been a big game changer for us. So that was the point as to starting of NuSpace. For us, we're dealing with IoT connectivity in remote locations. So IoT stands for Internet of Things. It's primarily for sensors and machine-to-machine kind of communication. It's not for us to use that kind of network for internet, surfing the internet, watching YouTube, watching Netflix. No, it's not for that. For that, you have your conventional big satellite companies or even Starlink, SpaceX Starlink or Amazon's Project Kuiper. They can provide high-speed internet connectivity from satellites. But it's always an engineering trade-off. When you have high-speed internet connectivity, you typically need a lot of power in order for you to communicate with the satellites. So if you've seen a Starlink ground terminal, these kind of terminals typically need to be plugged into the wall socket or some form of power because it's quite power intense. And this kind of solution is not really well suited for IoT applications because typically when you talk about IoT connectivity, you're dealing with sensors that are battery powered, and you're dealing with sensors that you hope to deploy out in the field for 3 to 5 years. So that makes a differentiation between what you're doing versus what the likes of SpaceX Starlink or Amazon Project Kuiper. It's a very, very different engineering consideration. It is very, very challenging to build such a satellite. And actually, we weren't successful on our first trial. We had built and launched satellites that are not successful. But I would say that all these failures teach us way more than successful attempt would have taught us. So it's important to fail and then to learn from it as well. And of course, along the way, apart from technical challenges, there were also many administrative challenges as well. So, for example, when we are dealing with connectivity, you're using radio frequencies, and when you have radio frequencies, there's the aspects of performing like frequency fouling in order for us to authorize the usage of that frequency band. So these are the kind of things that are more challenging than usual. I would say that some of the administrative problems are than technical problems. But like, of course, I would say that the main way to solve these problems is just take it a step at a time. When the problem comes to you, you try to solve it in one way, try to consult with people on how we can solve it. We try it out. If it fails, then we try another step. And I think the main thing is that we really need to ensure is that we plan our time well, so that we still have sufficient time even if we need to explore different options. So the vision for a NuSpace is really to provide safety for everyone everywhere. And we believe that the way to do that is to provide connectivity. So we're starting off with providing IoT connectivity using small satellites, because one of the ways that we entered the industry for satellite connectivity. Once we have established a good footing for satellite-based IoT connectivity, we have demonstrated the use case, and we have moved the customer pool. Then we start to look at other forms of connectivity that we can provide using the satellites. And we will hope to be able to do that for the Asian regions. And of course, for environmental monitoring, this is something that requires connectivity, especially in remote locations. So I would say that the connectivity that we're providing with satellites is more of an enabler for such applications to flourish. Because right now, the problem that we see with environmental monitoring is definitely the lack of connectivity in areas that you want to monitor. So by providing such satellite connectivity, we hope to be able to help improve the situation with environmental monitoring, and also perhaps make the Earth a much more sustainable place to be. So I think data privacy and data security is very important, especially when we have so much data. So we really need to ensure that we comply with these data protection policies within the company, as well as within the company and the customer's relationship. You need to ensure that the data protection is done properly. But of course, different countries have different policies and requirements. And us being a satellite connectivity company, it is natural that we actually need to serve multiple countries. So it becomes a matter of trying to comply with all of the countries around Asia, ensuring that we comply with the data protection policies that we have. For example, in Indonesia, there is a policy that the data collected from Indonesia can only be downloaded in Indonesia. Meaning we cannot collect the data from Indonesia, and then when the satellite comes to Singapore, then we download the data. That is not allowed. So we have to follow that. So information is collected in Indonesia, we need to download it right in Indonesia, and then from the service centers in Indonesia, we disperse the information. So it is starting to become a policy that the satellites that we launch into space, they need to be responsibly decommissioned after we are done with the mission itself. So for example, the FCC in US have already mandated that after the end of mission, you need to dispose of your satellite responsibly within 5 years. And typically that either involves us pushing the satellite into graveyard orbit, where it doesn't interfere with other satellites' operations, or if not, you will have to deorbit the satellite such that it comes back down into Earth's atmosphere and then burns through the Earth's atmosphere. So these are policies that we have to apply in order for us to even launch the satellites into space if we are using SpaceX launch vehicles. But of course, there's always option that where we don't comply, but that is definitely not advisable. So over at NuSpace, what we do is we ensure that when we do our missions and when we design the satellites, these satellites would be able to deorbit themselves by the end of their mission life. And to that extent, we are even developing our own deorbiting mechanisms such that we will then be able to make itself leave its orbit and then burn through the Earth's atmosphere so that it doesn't clutter up space. But let's say if you're talking about like the launch aspects, how can we reduce the amount of carbon that we are emitting because of the launch? Unfortunately, that's not something that we are looking at because we are a user of a launch vehicle and we are not designing the launch vehicle ourselves. Of course, we could make more informed choices of which launch vehicle to use that it's lesser carbon. But I think because the options that we have right now are very limited, so we are kind of stuck with that few launch providers. I think it's important for you to always keep the spirit of wonderment. Keep asking yourself questions like why things like this happen. It's like when you're young, when you first look up in the sky, you ask your parents or you ask the teachers, why is the sky blue? I think this kind of questions you need to keep them going because as you continue to pursue wonderment, I think that's the most important. I think as an entrepreneur, you really need to be very motivated and very driven. Entrepreneurship is a very challenging journey, and I would say that it's actually not something that I would advise for people to take up, to be honest. It's really very challenging. You have to manage a lot of things, manage a lot of day-to-day operations of the company, manage the emotions in the company, the operations of the company, and even you have to manage your own emotions when you're trying to pursue entrepreneurship, and then you look at your peers and friends, maybe they're doing better outside. So entrepreneurship, you have to really ask yourself, is this something that you want? Is this something that you're up to the challenge for? The question to also ask is, whenever there's a setback, do you have enough courage, enough motivation to push through and to be much stronger? It's good to want to be an entrepreneur, but it might not be the best thing for you. So we don't have any projects specific right now. We did, however, have inquiries of research organizations looking for a solution which allows them to monitor the growth of trees. Conventionally, what they do is they have to make a trip to like the Amazon rainforest, and when they go there, they physically measure the diameter of the tree. So by measuring the diameter of the tree, they can estimate the amount of growth the tree has, and by measuring that growth, they can estimate with certain models that they have the amount of carbon that each tree is sequestering. But this kind of physically going down to Amazon rainforest is a logistical nightmare, it's a safety risk. So they were wondering if is there a way that we can sensorize these trees and then use satellite connectivity to relay those information back so that it reduces the amount of human resource needed to go down to measure. So for example, instead of once a year, maybe they can now go down once every 2 years just to make sure that the measurements are still calibrated. So we have ever had such a request, but I think currently at the phase of where our company and where our business is, we are still more of trying to ramp up commercial service. We have just validated technology only. We have a satellite out there, and it shows that right now the next phase is launching more satellites to provide a commercial network.